Welcome to the second video of learning Greek. Today I want to introduce you to the Greek alphabet, show you how I write them, talk about how to write them, and also what they sound like. There are sort of three elements I think that we need to be thinking about each of the letters and sounds of the Greek alphabet. One is what they look like, so it's what the printed form is. So I'll show you those. The second is how you write them, and that's in a sense it's not complicated, but it's the bit where we can easily get it wrong. And the third is what they sound like. How do we say them? So there's seeing them, writing them, and saying them, and those are what I want to introduce you to in this video. Accompanying this video is a small file which will hopefully remind you of how to write them. It comes from Wenham's original textbook on writing Greek. Unfortunately, it hasn't been continued in Duff, and it's a shame because I found it very useful when I was learning Greek. So I'm going to make that available as a file, and you should see the location of that file, where it goes, where we put it, appearing down here. So have a look at that if you want to know more. So without further ado, we're going to look at the letters of the alphabet. So here we are with the first 6 letters of the Greek alphabet. What I'm going to do is do them in small chunks, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So we have the lowercase letters here, and that's what we're going to focus on. Then in fact the uppercase, and you'll notice that although some of them look very familiar, some of them look quite different. Then it gives you the name of each of these words, and we'll talk about them, and the Greek version of the name, which isn't that significant at this stage, but it's nice for you to see a little bit of Greek. And then the kind of English equivalent sound, and then in fact a sort of description of what the sound might sound like. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. So the real question is, how do you form the letters? Now, the letters, as in lowercase letters in English, they normally kind of, the smaller letters like alpha will go kind of in the middle of the line. I'm going to draw them a little bit bigger just so that you can see them, but really they ought to be half the line, okay? So with the alpha, you start at the top, come down and round and down. So it's more like, it's a bit like doing a Christian fish. Okay, so that's alpha. And as they say, it's an ah sound. It actually has 2 sounds. It's an ah sound as well as an ah sound. So it can be long or short. Beta is more like a capital B in a way, but it starts below the line, goes up to the top of the line. I'm going to do it a little bit bigger again, just so that we can see it. Okay, it's harder actually doing it like this because I'm doing it on a tablet than it is writing on a piece of paper. So that's beta, B, and then gamma. So that's really very simple, G. And then delta. Now then delta is at the top of the line. I'm going to do it a little bit higher, and it's like a D, but it kind of comes up round and round like that. So a little bit ornate, an ornate D. Epsilon. Now there's 2 ways of drawing the epsilon. I do it like that, so it's like a 3, only reverse. Some people do it like a sort of shallow C with a line in the middle. Either way, doesn't matter. Mine has the advantage you don't take the pen off the paper, but there you go. And then zeta, which is the one new letter. It's like a big C with a tail, but it has a little tail at the top as well, so something like that. Now, let me say, exactly how you write these is not terribly important. So, you know, get comfortable, do it your way. But it does need to be readable, especially if you're working in a group with other people, or you're going to submit work to your tutor or lecturer. It needs to be understandable by others. So you can't just write any old rubbish. It does need to look the part. Okay. We don't really know what these words sounded like. And the truth is that the descriptions of how they sound that are given here, and you will see in almost any textbook, are very anglicised. So again, it doesn't really matter. And again, you need to pronounce them the way your colleagues are pronouncing them. So if you're in a lecture group, you pronounce them the way everyone else does, so that you can understand each other. But it is generally considered good practice to read the Greek aloud whenever possible. Okay, so a, b, g. Now, d, e, and z, but the z is often a dz. They've actually said it's a z. I think it's more of a dz. I've lost the focus on this, so dz. Sometimes it's a zd as well, so don't worry too much about it. The g is, I'm going to rub these out in fact, so let's get rid of those. That's a bit of rubbish there. The g is, it quite possibly would have been pronounced pretty much the way it's pronounced still in modern Greek, almost a y sound, y. I mean, we don't have it in English. But because it's English speaker or English speakers that I'm talking to, I'm going to just say do the g and forget about any complications. The capital letters, just so that you know, I'm not really too worried about how you write these. A and B, obviously, you write the same way as you do. The gamma is like an F, but without the second bar. And the delta, you possibly come across in maths or something like that. Epsilon is the E that we know, and the zeta is a Z that you know. Okay, so apart from the gamma and the delta, and no great problems, and even the gamma and the delta are pretty easy. Okay, so that's the first group of letters. Now, what I recommend is write them down a few times, learn how to work out how to write them down, then get a blank piece of paper and write them in sequence. And just concentrate on those 6 until you're fairly comfortable that you know what they are. And then we'll talk about the next 6. So the next 6 contain a few more esoteric letters, and these are going to be fun. Okay, so the next one is eta, which is like a sort of N with a little tail, so like that. Okay? N with a little tail. Now I'm going to come back and look at the pronunciation of that, but that's the eta. And then you get theta. Now notice that you had 2 E's. You had the epsilon, which we learnt in the first group. Then you had a zeta in the middle, and then you had an eta. So the 2 E's go together. And I think of it as easy. E, Z, E, ha, ha, ha. So you can keep them together. And then, in fact, this theta has is aspirated, a th, so it's got an H in it. So it's like H. So they're kind of more or less in the order of the English alphabet, really. So eta, theta, and then, in fact, iota, which is like an I, but it doesn't have a dot on the top. Kappa, which is like a little capital K. Lambda, which is easy enough to write, but it's not quite normal. And then mu, which is like a U, but with a starting tail, so you come up like that. Okay? Eta, theta, iota, kappa, lambda, mu. Lambda is sometimes called lamma as well. Mu. And the capitals, it's counterintuitive and people do get confused over that, but this is an E sound. It's a long E. Theta, the capital theta, is like a big O with a little bar in the middle. Okay, you can do it simply with just a line, but don't join it up. Iota is an I. You can just do it as a simple I or a complicated I. Kappa is the same as our K. Lambda is a kind of inverted V, or it's like a delta without the bottom, and mu is just like ours. Okay? I'm more concerned with how you write the lowercase than I am the uppercase, but there you go. Now, it says here that the eta is pronounced like A. So if you think about it, it tells you here that the word is eta. So in fact, if you go by the pronunciation that Wenham gave, it will be eta. Eta. More classical scholars tend to say it's an air sound, so it would be eta, which is, it's not a huge amount of difference. If you're in a group, you go with the pronunciation that the group got. Your lecturer or whoever will have said a particular sound, go with that. I tend to say air, so you know, if you hear me saying eta and you say eta, then don't worry about it. All the other sounds are pretty straightforward, so no problems there. Now, as before, focus on those 6 sounds, learn them, get them in sequence. Once you've learnt those 6 sounds, go back and do all 12 and see that you can get those in order. And I'm suggesting, sorry, in both cases, and I should have said this in the first group, you stop the video here until you're comfortable that you've got a reasonable grasp of these, and then move on to the next group. Okay? So, our third group, again, have 1 or 2 little extra complexities in, so we'll come to those. So, the first one is new. I guess if you're American, you might say new. Whether the Greeks said new or new, I don't know. And then quite a complicated one, sorry about the noise in the background, is xi. Okay, and it's this squiggly squamp with a tail. So it's like a very fancy E with a tail. And it goes from top of the line to bottom of the line. Then omicron, and it's an O sound. O. Pi, which is in fact a P sound. Rho, which is a R sound. And be careful, it looks like a P. That's not terribly well drawn, nor is that really, but it's somewhere between the two. But it's a R sound. And then in fact you've got 2 symbols for an S, a sigma. The one that you normally see is this one, so it's like an O with a little tail at the top, that's sigma, and you get that in the middle of the word, at the beginning or in the middle of the word. But if the word ends in an S, so if we have something like tis, you get the other one, which looks like this. So it's more like a small C with a tail. So this is when the S is at the last character in the word. So n, x, x, o, p, r, s. New, xi, omicron, pi, rho, sigma. And the capitals, new looks pretty much like our N. Xi is just really 3 bars, only one, the middle one is slightly shorter. Omicron is like our capital O. Pi is the same but bigger. Rho is looks like P, but remember it's a R. And sigma you've probably come across at some, ooh, that wasn't very good, was it? At some stage. Okay, no great shakes on that. The psi, it is like an X, but it's more like a k, s, so it's more like a x. But I suppose X is a little bit. We'll come back and talk about 1 or 2 of these sounds a little bit later. Now, once again, this is a third group, so stop the video, learn the third group. Then, in fact, I would say go on to the 4th group, learn the 3rd and 4th group together. When you're comfortable with that, try and put all 4 of the groups together. Okay? But that's the 3rd group. And then we come to the final group, the final 6. This group has the larger proportion of slightly unusual letters. that you may or may not have come across. So we're carrying on from where we were. The first of this group of letters is tau, which is the T sound, and it's like a fancy T. Fancy capital T, only small. Upsilon, now do be careful about this. Upsilon is a U. Okay, I don't try and duplicate the complexity of that printed equivalent, but do be careful because you need to distinguish it from nu. So be careful about that bottom, make sure it's rounded rather than sharp. The next symbol is a phi. I do it like this. I can't remember what Wenham tells you to do, but again, they've drawn it rather like that. So you can do either. Okay, so I do it in this case with 2 strokes. So it's kind of a fancy straight line with a circle around it. Other people will just kind of draw it round. Then you get chi, which is looks like a bit more like an X really, but it's a ch sound like in the Scottish loch. And then psi, so it's kind of like a big U with a line down the middle, psi, or a bit like Neptune's trident. And then omega, which is really looks a lot like a W. Okay, when you come to the capitals, the tau is pretty much the same. Interestingly enough, the upsilon is actually a Y. And it was more an E than an U. Although this says English U, and we pronounce it as U, it actually was more of an E sound. And it's interesting that a lot of words that have come from Greek that use the upsilon have a Y in them. Phi, the capital Phi, is just an I with the circle at the top. Probably a bit bigger than that, but still. The chi is actually drawn as an X, but remember it's a ch sound, not a x. The x we've already met, the xi. And the psi, again, looks pretty much like the lowercase, only it's kind of higher up, bigger. And the omega is completely different. It's a strange symbol, but I hope you come across it from time to time. The omega's there. Now we've talked about the upsilon sound and how it actually is an E sound, but we are normally encouraged to use U. The phi is really an F. Phi, it's an F sound. The chi we've talked about, it's the loch. The psi is a PS, and you know we get it into words like psychology. We don't tend to pronounce the P, but it's there, and that's why it's spelt with a PS. And omega is a long O. So as in omega, not omega, omega. So those are the letters. 24 letters, 4 groups of 6, and I've recommended that you learn them in groups of 6. I've got a few more comments to make about letters, but we'll do that in another video. So let's see if you can remember these.